So this is pretty much what's happening to lots of biodiversity around the world, and I got concerned about what would change about this dynamic if agriculture didn't have access to petrochemicals. So I used a natural experiment that happened in the mid-2000s when the global oil supply leveled off, and there was a spike in the price of oil and also a spike in the price of food and fertilizer. And I mapped the change in deforestation rate before and after the global financial crisis, so this is where it's speeding up and slowing down, and also looked at how it impacted on biodiversity, and they're pretty much in the same places, so I think it's really, the changes are really targeting the biodiversity areas, and this is where the statistically significant areas are. So there was this massive increase during that time in deforestation, and Asia was particularly hit, and so I did this meta-analysis of quantitative assessment of the drivers of those changes in the hotspot areas, and it was really non-subsistence agriculture that was really dominating what was going on in those regions. I also looked at land grabbing as a possible explanatory factor, and it really was not associated at all. And that says to me that land grabbing is really targeting existing agricultural land. And but if you look at the countries where there's been more than the area of existing agricultural land is under contract, then you can see that there's areas where if all of that land is put into production, it's going to inevitably result in massive deforestation. There were some areas where it slowed down as well, so these three were significant globally, and they all had plans for reducing deforestation, and there was a significant reduction once the plans came into effect, and there was also significant preemptive clearing in the run-up to the plan, and also there's been moved to reverse that policy with subsequent administrations, so it's been politically untenable long term. Next I want to look at what will happen if we don't have replacements for nitrogen fertilizer in the future, and I did this linear model of existing global data set of nitrogen use efficiency, and used it to map the amount of land that would be necessary to grow our crops without nitrogen fertilizer by taking existing cropland and iteratively expanding and intensifying the cropland use till it met the targets. So this is a current cropland, and this is the minimum extra that would be required, and it ran out of land before it reached the maximum area. And this isn't taking suitability into account, so this is over-optimistic. But pretty much, even under the minimum case, we'd run out of suitable land, and that would be very bad news for biodiversity. I also wanted to look at the effect that price has on it. So I looked at the price elasticity, and this is the hotspot countries, so they're quite sensitive to the price of fertilizer. And when you take that into account, it sort of alleviates the pressure on the wealthier countries and intensifies it, particularly in Central America and East Asia and the poorer parts of the world. So this is comparing them with no price and taking price into account, and then what actually happened during the global financial crisis. You can see this sort of area is less intense. So it concentrates in the areas, tends to concentrate in the areas where there's more biodiversity. Looking at land suitability, there's some countries that have already run out of additional arable land, and most of the rest of the world would run out even in the minimum case, the minimum amount extra that we would need. So next, what I want to do is look at what would be the footprint of a best case scenario, so of what we could replace mineral N with, and then do a cost effectiveness spatial prioritization. How do you decide what to use where? Yes, so there was a speeding up of deforestation, and it particularly happened in the areas where it tended to particularly happen in the areas where there was more biodiversity.
And why do you think that deforestation occurs?
Okay. Yes, sorry, it's just trying to put it all pathways. One is that the move away from petrochemical-based fertilizer, petrochemical-based energy systems requires at least two orders of magnitude more land area. So that's one pathway that's a known pathway that's already been written about. And the one that I'm looking at is agricultural expansion, because fertilizers are made from petrochemicals. As the price goes up, people have to weigh up, is it more cost effective for them to use more land to grow the food or to use more fertilizer? And at the property scale, all these farmers are making that decision all the time, particularly marginal farmers. So if they've got the option to expand their land area, then, and that's cheaper to do than using more fertilizer, then they tend to use more fertilizer. That's what I'm arguing is one of the main reasons. And there was all this speculation on food and agricultural land, but it doesn't look like that's affected it yet.
Any more questions?
What's the answer to this question?
That's a bit I haven't done yet. They're a little way off. You can only get 18% of the end this way. And at the moment they denitrify the sewage sludge before they put it on because of worries about pollution. So they're doing the opposite of what you want to try and solve this problem. But there are technologies emerging that will enable them to capture the nitrogen for using that. But you can only get 18%. This is quite popular in some areas, but it uses a lot of land area, which is why I've got marine and question mark, because if you could do it in marine areas it would be nice, but it doesn't tolerate salt, so you'd have to find a way of growing it in fresh water in a marine environment, which is challenging. And this is only hydrogen production at this stage, but you could use that because they need the hydrogen to make ammonia. So you could use this method to produce ammonia, but again, it's not really being done, and it does require land to do it. So I think these are the three that I want to target as the most promising, and it will depend on the cost of transport and the cost of land and the cost of labour and these sorts of things. That's what I've got to look at.
Is intercropping of nitrogen fixing plants of any value on the scale of these things?
Yes, but it takes up land area. So, you've got to. That's basically you're using some of your land area to grow nitrogen. So that's also displacing forest somewhere.
Is human waste recycling limited by the problem of metal contamination that goes along with it?
Yes, they do, because all of Sydney Water's sewage sludge gets recycled, and they take out the heavy metals, so they can do that. But in developing countries, they don't tend to have a big problem with that. So, yes, it's a problem. I don't know how the cost effectiveness of removing the heavy metals is. I haven't gotten to this part yet.
For what it